the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. Every year that I publish the calendar, which has now been for 20 years, I include the article, The Maiden Moon by Bruce Brill. Now, Bruce Brill was an independent journalist. He was actually vetted by the Jerusalem Post with a lie detector test because Bruce Brill worked for NSA, the National Security Agency, or NSA, no such agency. And he was with the U.S. Army, worked for NSA in America, and he was in the U.S. Army back in 1973. And he experienced something that the Jerusalem Post wanted to know and needed to know if he was telling the truth or not. Bruce Brill tells the story how he was working with NSA, and in 1973, the U.S. State Department told Israel that the Arabs would not attack them on or before Yom Kippur. And this was a statement that they made. Don't worry about it. On or before Yom Kippur, you've got no worries at all. They're not going to attack. Go about your normal business, because things were heating up. They knew something was going to come down. Well, at NSA, Bruce Brill was then called in. The entire team was called in before the event, and they were all going to be on leave, taking off, and they were all called back in because they knew it was going down on Yom Kippur. But yet the State Department deliberately lied to Israel so they would be caught off guard, and they came within an inch of extinction. If it were not for the Victor Kalani in the Valley of Tears and the incredible tank battle that took place, that took the lives of so many people, if it were not for that and the hand of the Almighty, which sent an angel, and this is reported by the Syrians themselves, that they saw an angel tell them to stop at the very place that there was erected between Laban and Jacob, a place, a monument that says, the Lord watch between you and me if either one of us crosses over this line to do harm to one the other. When they came to that line, they said that they saw an angel standing there, covering the sky with a hand out saying, stop. And they turned the entire tank battalion with nothing stopping them. They could have been in Tel Aviv in an hour and a half, nothing to stop them. And they turned around and went back to Damascus. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Brill, in 1998, I came with the calendar. It was very similar to this one right here. This is an old piece. This is what it started out being right here, which is just basically calculations. This is one of my old working models right here. But I took it to Jerusalem and to find new moon watchers, someone who could verify our sightings. And I will say this is what appeared in the papers in Jerusalem in 1998. This is what Bruce Brill wrote. So, he's a respected journalist, and even though they put him to a lie detector test, everything checked out, they realized that this is too hot of a political potato to hand to anyone, that the United States State Department, the one that Hillary Clinton was in charge in, but not yet, the State Department has been undermining Israel and the United States for literally generations now. And the U.S. State Department deliberately lied to Israel to cost thousands and thousands of lives, and would have, if not for the hand of the Almighty, caused the extinction of the state of Israel. And so he gave his testimony, and the politicians decided, we can't touch this thing. But this is what he wrote in 1998, published in Jerusalem. Just this year, 1998, an American team, including astronomer Robert Scott Wadsworth, published a calendar of the projected monthly new moon appearances from Jerusalem. The team's Michael Rood arrived in Israel recently with the express purpose of finding moon watchers to confirm his team's exciting findings. So far, his data from the Jewish New Year and this writer's sightings agree. If Rood's data scientifically confirms my nearly 5 years of observation, then the Jewish people are out of sync. Furthermore, if this is true, then instead of a calendar on the wall, we should be looking for the forlorn maiden moon each month in the twilight of the western horizon. How did I meet Bruce Brill? Joshua Cohen got a hold of me. We were staying up on the roof at Petra Hostel. He said, you've got to come and meet these people. They're harp makers. They're Jewish harp makers downtown Jerusalem. And so I followed him down. We went into the harp shop there, and as I was speaking with Mika and Shoshana Harari, and I'm talking to them about the situation that here we are, and we were wrong on both days. The biblical calendar is definitely different from the modern Jewish calendar. And Mika Harari said, well, what difference does it make as long as we're celebrating the feast at the same time? And right then, we could see walking up to the door, a glass door, he said, oh, this is of God. You can't believe who's about to walk in the door. Guy walks in the door, opens his mouth immediately and says, we couldn't see the moon the night before last. We couldn't see it last night. We missed Rosh Hashanah by both days this year. And I said to him, was the new moon such and such percent illuminated, so many degrees above the horizon, 5 minutes after sunset? He looked at me and lit up and knew that I knew that this was the most important thing in the world. Within a few minutes, I find out that he has built a home out in Tekoa, on a mountaintop in Tekoa, with the apex of the roof open so that every month he could sight the new moon. I came there looking for new moon sighters, not even understanding or realizing that the rabbis have been having a rabbinic court every single month and hearing the testimony of new moon witnesses. We had 5 years of calculations. And I say this, ladies and gentlemen, here it is. I'm just going to bring this stuff out. These are calculations. These are literally pages, thousands and thousands of calculations that we did over years and years of calendar work. This is what I presented, and the rabbis who had been watching the new moon every month found that what we had calculated by scientific calculation from the United States of America was dead on every single month for the entire 5-year period that we calculated it, bringing it up to through 1997 and 1998 to show when the new moon would be seen. And this is the work that went into it. This is why I was saying in our last episode that, this isn't something that, was just Johnny come lately. I hear about the calendar and I decide to come up with it. We were working on the calendar more than 30 years ago. These are pages, all handwritten, hundreds of pages of calculations to be able to determine the biblical calendar and how it is all calculated. If it's not here, then then we have them. Oh, I have actually blank pages left over from back in those days. Here's another notebook. You want to see it? Here's all handwritten. This is Robert Scott Wadsworth. This is his own handwriting. We began in 5 BC, before the Common Era. 5 BC to figure out what is going on with the stars in the calendar around the birth of Yeshua. These, ladies and gentlemen, these are more than 30 years old. So when I talk about the 38 years that it took to be able to do the chronological Gospels, I'm not joking. This is how long the years of research went into it. Oh, here we are. Oh, you want to see what it takes to do this? Here it is in typewritten with whiteout. And after the whiteout, we get tired of using whiteout, then we just put them in these things and use blue ink, markers on it in order to be able to sort these things through and keep on working. And so there were questions that I had 30 years ago that it took more than 30 years to get an answer. Some questions, 20 years I had the question on because it just stopped. Could not figure it out until modern astronomy, until mirrors on the moon. All these things took place, and then finally, our calendar is in the hands of the Rabbinic Council that's responsible for citing the new moon. Well, that year, 1998, when this was published, then I was invited to become a member of the Israeli New Moon Society. Because 5 years, never missing it once, they were all amazed. Because the rabbis, the rabbinic scholars, when the Israeli New Moon Society meets, it's not done in English. You don't speak English except at the breaks. And everything is done in Hebrew, so Bruce Brill is the one that has to translate for me. But the president was up front, and he said, I've got to go up and let him know that you're here. So he went up and told him he was getting his papers arranged on the dais. He came back and shook my hand, introduced himself, and said to me, there's one more calculation that you have to have before your calendar's right, because I had the astronomically corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. And then he tore off a little piece of paper from my notes, wrote down a phone number on it, and that's all that was on it. And then he said, tore it off, put it under some, and he said, now don't show this to anyone, it'll get us both thrown out of here if you do. Do you understand? I said, yeah, I understand. Understand no one's to see this. I had no idea why he'd get us thrown out of here. I mean, he's like the president of the Israeli New Moon Society. So the next day, Bruce makes the call, and down at coffee time, we meet Nehemiah Gordon. Now the rest of the details come together. This is 1998, and this is the year that it all comes together, because I meet the Karaite Nehemiah Gordon, who came from America. It's a Hebrew University student at that time, and he came over specifically to work in the land of Israel, to understand the Aviv, which he'd heard about from a child in Hebrew school, sitting on the knee of his father, who was teaching him the Torah when he was 4 years old and reading Hebrew at 4 years of age. He wants to know what this is all about, because he now knows that this is the beginning of the year, and this is exactly what the New Moon Society, they all know. And as a matter of fact, the president said, Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year on the first day of the 7th month, it's a rabbinic tradition. It's not true. The year begins when the barley is Aviv. And that was all he said. As he whispered this to me, I sat there with Nehemiah and Bruce Brill, and the rest of the details came together at that point. This was the beginning of the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar, the last piece of information that it took to get this dead on. And without that information, and the years that Nehemiah documented this, more than 12 years of working before he could say definitively, yes, we know what Aviv is now. It took that many years of in the fields, day after day, at the time when it should be Aviv, analyzing this stuff out, not just flying in at the last moment, but out there working in the fields, working in the barley to understand this. We planted that year 7 barley fields in the land of Israel. I bought the barley, we tilled the fields, we dunged them, we did everything in order to plant these. We planted 7 of these fields in the property of Levites around the land of Israel. This is not something that was done in a corner, ladies and gentlemen. This was so that I could understand and figure out the chronological gospels, the order of events in Yeshua's ministry. That's what it was all about. So that was when I first met Nehemiah, and it was at coffee time downtown Jerusalem, and that is where things started rolling. It was 2 years later, in the spring of the year, that I said that if we have accurately calculated and adjusted for the Aviv barley in the land of Israel this spring, because at that point in the year 2000, it was still a question. It was still, to fully understand exactly what this ancient Hebrew agricultural term meant. It had taken over a decade, and yet the question was still there. Have we done it right? And I said, if so, then we are going to see violence erupt in Jerusalem before sundown, September 28th. Now, why would I use a pagan date on this? Because no one would understand that if I said the first day of the 7th, before the first day of the 7th month, which was sundown September 28th. I made this statement. I was on the Prophecy Club tour, 90 cities. I was around speaking these words all over America, on radio, on television, that we will see violence erupt before sundown, September 28th, if we've corrected the barley for this year. Well, what happened that year is Ariel Sharon, on the morning of September 28th, with a group of people ascended the Temple Mount. He read the prophecy of Ezekiel concerning the two sticks in the hand of the Messiah, bringing Judah and Israel back together again in the last days. The violence erupted, and it was just as I had read in Isaiah. See, I didn't pull this out of thin blue sky, nor did I receive revelation from an angel in heaven. I was taken to Isaiah, and Isaiah speaks of Israel's leaders being boastful and doing wickedly against the covenant. This is God's covenant with Abraham. You know, all the land from the Euphrates to the Nile belongs to the sons of Israel. No one can annul this covenant. No one is going to circumvent this, because even the Almighty put Abraham to sleep, as if to say, it's not even up to your strength. You're going to be dead in the grave. I'm going to make this. This is my covenant with Israel, which I will never break. It is a blood covenant. I will walk like a smoking pot up and down between these pieces of flesh through this blood. This blood is on my feet. The blood is on my head if I do not fulfill this. This is a blood covenant, singular, on the hand of the Almighty. And he said Israel's leaders would do wickedly against that covenant. They would, for the promise of peace, give away this land under the hand of the United Nations. It is an agreement with hell, a covenant with death, that the Almighty said, I will annul with violence. That covenant was entered into September 13th, 1993, White House lawn, called the Oslo Accord. Oslo, meaning toilet seat in modern Hebrew. It's just the capital of Norway otherwise, but the Almighty does have a sense of humor. And it was at that point in time that they made a 7-year agreement. Now, there were people out there, again, false prophets. I remember this began the last 7 years, and we're going to see the abomination of desolation in 1996, and if this doesn't happen, I am not a prophet. Never listen to me again, because the Lord told me that that this is what it is. And if not, no one should ever listen to me again. Well, I didn't say anything at the time. I said, well, if it is, we're going to see global thermonuclear war by the spring of 1996. So what happened at this particular point in time is in 1993, Israel made a 7-year agreement with the United Nations, the Oslo Peace Accord, in which they would give over the land, part of the land of Israel, to the enemy, to the United Nations, to distribute to the enemy of Israel. They would give over the Temple Mount to the Pope, would have control of that. The East Jerusalem would be the capital of the terrorist state of the Palestinians. And what would Israel get? They would get peace. Yeah, right. That's what the plan was. The agreement with hell, the covenant with death, it was a 7-year plan, and that is why I said, the Almighty said he would annul that covenant with violence. What is 7 years from September 13th? It's not September 13th, because September 13th is a pagan date. It is Tishri 1. Tishri 1 of this announcement, 1993. We go 7 years into the future. It is Tishri 1 at sundown, September 28th. And so for more than a half year, I said, if we have accurately ascertained the Aviv for this year, we will see violence erupt sundown, September 28th. What happened? A lot of false prophets out there started saying, I said Jesus was coming back on September 28th. Why did they say that? Because they're morons. They're complete idiots. You know, people that know little about anything they didn't learn in seminary. Messianic Jewish leaders. basically, Baptist theology just wrapped up with a bunch of Jewish words arguing with the rabbis about whether Yeshua is the Messiah or not, okay? It's like Baptist theology, pre-tribulation rapture, dispensational theology, replacement theology still pervades because, it's basically, the Messianic Judaism cult is basically a bunch of Baptists that are Jewish that, want to be really special, but hang on to their Baptist theology. I was raised a Baptist too. I had to shuck the Baptist theology and everything related to it, such as replacement theology, which is based on dispensational theology, upon which the pre-tribulation rapture is built. Without replacement theology, there is no pre-tribulation rapture. Just doesn't exist in the plain text of the scripture. So, what did we have? A bunch of people saying that I was a false prophet because I said Jesus was coming back. I said, read the book. Read the book. It's 10 years old. No, at that point it was 5 years old. It's like 30 years old now. 5 years old at that point. I already laid it out. There's no question about it, ladies and gentlemen. And so, what happened? It was annulled. And as far as I know, it's the first time that an ancient prophecy has been called to the very day. Not because of an angelic visitation, it's because of decades of attempting to understand the Creator's calendar. Volumes and volumes, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours, years of my life to put into this. And that's why when people come up with a new calendar and all this, it's like, oh, people, I did that in kindergarten. I was doing this. We got it right before you were born, okay? We don't need to rehash it so you can become famous by coming up with a new Wheel of the Stars or some plagiarism of Murdoch's, Aramaic work of a Greek translation of a Hebrew translation. It's time to grow up, people. It's time to understand when the message is coming from heaven and when it isn't, okay? So now, here we go, people. Israel experiences the second intifada. Thousands of people die. We're still in the same intifada to this very day. And then we have something happen the very next year. It's the year 2001. March 26, 2001 at sundown. This is when the report comes from Nehemiah, the barley is Aviv that week. We know sundown, March 26, that will be Aviv 1. And now my calculations that I've been working on for years are now complete. I can do no more. I can do no less. I have calculated now that we are 240 and 1/2 years have been subtracted from the total elapsed time calendar on the Jewish calendar. Rabbi Shimon Swab said that he could prove there are 167 years that were missing from the calendar. He also stated that when the head rabbis hid the book of genealogies, which is written by Nehemiah, and you've never even seen it, you've never heard about it, ladies and gentlemen, because this is only in Hebrew that the details of this exist. That the rabbis hid the book of genealogies written by Nehemiah, and when they did that, it darkened the understanding of the rabbis. That's what took place. It darkened the understanding of the rabbis. And when it darkened their understanding, they were no longer able to calculate the year from creation that we were actually in, so that no one would know when the day or the millennium of the Lord began, which I was looking for. 6001 would be the beginning of the day or the millennium of the Lord. This particular year, in the spring, I get the word from Nehemiah, I am in Orlando, Florida. And I am working fiercely to complete the calendar and then to send it to press. And that morning I say, I have no choice. I must go to press with this. There are no more calculations. There's nothing that I have access to that would allow me to change. This is the year, right now, the beginning of 6001. March 26th, at sundown. The first day of the month of the Aviv, 6001. And Chaim Goldman was there. A number of others said, well, we really need to pray for confirmation. I said, I've been praying for confirmation. I am praying for confirmation. And then we received a phone call. It was a Messianic leader that was there in Orlando, wanted to meet with me. And so we said, well, you tell us where. We're not familiar with the area. I was just in the area teaching. And he found out, he drove over, and guess it was a couple-hour drive. Got over there and told us what hotel to meet at. We met for a couple of hours, and then at the end of the meeting, as we were saying goodbye, the doors of the grand ballroom opened up, and out came, in full regalia, the Freemasons of Florida, having just concluded their big weekend event. I thought, what an excellent opportunity. We walked into the grand ballroom. I said, let's see what's in there. What accoutrements they may have. Let's see if they have a rendition of Solomon's pillars in there or whatever. Walked in above the dais. It said the 170, forgive me if I don't have the number right now, but I believe it's the 173rd Annual Convention of the Freemasons of Florida. On one of the chairs, only one, was the budget for that year for the Freemasons. Somebody left it behind. I'm sure this was not public information. And I looked at it and I saw this is when they were founded. It has the seal of when they were founded and the Masonic seal. And I did a quick calculation. I said, it's 6001. And they said, no, the 173rd, no, you can't count, it's 6,000. I said, no, it's an annual convention. You start with the beginning. And I said, no, it's 6,000. And the rest of the team with me, they were, I'm not sure that's right. So we got back to the hotel. And I said, okay, I'm going to find out. I went back to the hotel, and it had all broken up. I walked around the swimming pool, found a man with a Masonic emblem on his shirt, and I said, according to my calculations, this is the year 6001, according to the Masons. He said, that's right, 6001 AL. I said, AL, what's that mean? In the year of our Lord? I said, no, AD is Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. And he said, no, I think AL is the year of our Lord too. And I showed him a video, The Great Secret of Solomon's Temple, on the back. It has 6001.com. He was shocked. He was stunned. He said, let me find out what AL means. And he called up a 73-year-old Masonic scholar in Texas, got him on the phone. And so he talked to him for a minute, then handed the phone to me. And I said, and so what does the AL mean? He said, Anno Lucis, in the year of Lucis. In the year of our Lord. I understood. That week, because this was going to transpire on Shabbat, that week, 40 Ashkenazi and Sephardic rabbis met at the Western Wall to make a unified proclamation to the Jews of the entire world. And I'm going to tell you what that proclamation was right after we take this break. Doesn't matter when you're watching this because we are freely giving that which cost us thousands and thousands of dollars, an incredible team of people, the staff that not only are degreed, but also years of experience in the field to be able to produce these programs and to get this message out to the world. We're doing everything we can, going every venue that we can. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been invited on just about every Christian network on the planet. The only thing that holds us back is that we don't have the finances. Why? Because this is the truth, and people don't want to support the truth. They want to support some feel-good thing where send me all your money, I'll pray over it, and you're going to be, floating in a yacht or driving a Rolls Royce or some such nonsense with these hairdo preachers, okay? I'm not giving you this hockey foddy. I'm telling you the truth, but I need you to stand with me. I'm not promising you, a rose garden. I'm promising you that we will be faithful to get the word of the gospel of the kingdom that Yeshua taught out to the world, and I need your help to do it because our reward is on the sea of fire and glass, period. I need a check for $5 million. I need somebody out there to write me a check for $5 million. If you can't write me a check for $5 million because I already know what to do with it, it's not going to be buy a new car. Mine is 7 years old. It's close enough, folks. No, if you want to help, I know where it's going to go. I need that check. If you can't afford $5 million, $1 million will do. If you can't afford that, at least tithe. At least a tenth of what you earn in this life belongs to the Almighty, just because you're breathing His air that we have been messing up. Okay? When the 40 rabbis from both the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic persuasion, rabbis that disagree on so many things, they have two different versions of the same books. They have two different calendars, and even on the modern Jewish calendar, it will give you a date for the Pharisee, Shavuot, Pentecost, and another date for the Zadokim, the Sadducee, Shavuot. Because the Zadokim, the Sadducees, the sons of Zadok, that priest line was in charge of the temple. And the temple service was done according to all the commandments and ordinances of King David. All of the rehearsals that David put in place for Passover, for Shavuot, the Feast of First Fruits, Sukkot, all of the feasts of the Lord, everything that David put in place that were being done in the Second Temple period was because David was a prophet who saw beforehand the coming of the Messiah. He put in place these prophetic shadow pictures that the Messiah would fulfill in Jerusalem when he comes to Jerusalem. And so that's why we see when the scriptures unfold, the chronological gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all show how the Messiah is literally fulfilling the rehearsals that were embedded in the feast that David, the prophet, saw in advance. And that is what allows us to decode the Gospels and to understand what is going on. By understanding the Feast of the Lord and the Creator's calendar, that is how things can be put in chronological order. That is why I can take any chronology that has been done, and I don't care what language it's in, because I can go there and I will find the verses and I will show you where they made their mistakes, and I don't even have to be able to read the text. I know where they made the mistakes because they keep making the same mistakes over and over and over, because every chronology of the Gospels has been done by Gentiles who know nothing about the Creator's calendar, nothing about the Feast of the Lord, and did not have the advantage that I have had. Isaac Newton didn't have my advantage. He's far smarter than I was, but he did not have Armstrong putting mirrors on the moon in the calculations of NASA that spanned well over a decade for us to be able to run through our little computers and then produce the result that allows us to find the first sliver of the new moon in Jerusalem at any point in time in history. Ladies and gentlemen, it is incredible what we have. These things were reserved for this day, for such a time as this. And that's why the question, were you born for such a time as this? Or are you just an extra on the set? Are you just taking up space? Are you just breathing good, clean air and soaking up the rest of the water and will never do anything. See, you've been put here for a reason. We are staying on the shoulders of giants who went before us, who gave their lives to get a copy of the scriptures in a language that we can understand. They gave their entire lives to do this. This only took me 38 years to be able to produce this. But I couldn't have done it if people hadn't died. Men, women, and children butchered by Rome because they had a copy of this in the language of the people. And it was absolutely forbidden because they wanted to have complete tyranny over the mind of man. I, like Thomas Jefferson, have sworn eternal hostility over every form of tyranny over the mind of man. That's exactly what's on the inside of the rotunda of Jefferson's memorial. That is one of the greatest memorials in America that has ever been. I have sworn upon the altar of Almighty God eternal hostility over every form of tyranny over the mind of man. And I will not have people tyrannized by King James English. That's why I've corrected it. I've set you free from King James English, but to get to the heart of what Yeshua is talking about, to get right down to what he is doing, where he is going, what he is saying, why he's saying it, to whom he's saying it, when he's saying it, to have all the details in order, that has been the driving passion. And now, the rabbis, Sephardic and Ashkenazi rabbis, who can hardly agree on anything, make a unified proclamation to the entire world. The week of March 26th, leading up to that Shabbat, they made the proclamation, and they made it twice. They went down on two separate occasions to establish it. The time of Jacob's trouble has now begun. Jews now from all over the world return to the land of Israel. The next year, at the time that the barley was aviv and the new moon appeared, they said, last year, we said that the time of Jacob's trouble has now begun. Jews surrounded or scattered over the face of the earth, now come home to Israel. We've been calling for this for a year. Come home to Israel now. The time of Jacob's trouble has now begun. But what happened 6 months after the time of Jacob's trouble had now begun? A Jewish prophet left the environs of Jerusalem with a message to the people of Iceland. He arrived, called a press conference, and he said to the entire nation, the Muslims are about to do something that will change the face of the earth. It will be so horrific, it will change the world. All week long, they kept replaying that press conference. And every night on the news, the newscasters would laugh at him. The crazy man from Israel. The crazy man from Israel, night after night after night. The end of the week, this berated prophet flew back to Israel. I arrived the next morning. I went to sleep. After 2 days of not sleeping, I woke up with Ingy at Ingy's bed and breakfast, slamming his fist on the door. Something terrible has happened in America. The trade centers were on their way down at that moment. I picked up where the prophet left off. I was sent from Costa Rica to deliver a message. And that message, I went for hours on television. And as I mentioned last week, at the end, I did a seminar, and a woman stood up and said, I thought you were going to tell us the relationship with Solomon's pillars and the trade centers. And a bolt of lightning went through me. I mean, it was electric. It almost floored me. And I said, I didn't know that I was going to tell you about it, but there's something there. I don't know what it is. Then at the last great day, what I shared with you, in Jerusalem, when the revelation concerning the evil fire offering in the flying containers, the size of Scud missiles, being launched from the land of Shinar against the land of Israel, and what would be the beginning of it? The two man-made mountains of brass, those two towers coming down, and that is when the war chariots were released. That began World War III. The Muslims had declared war upon all the Jews who happened to own the trade centers and the Christians. That was the beginning of the war. And I wrote at that time that the Almighty is going to use the worshipers of a fictitious moon god to judge those who have turned their back on the creator of the heavens and the earth. And the nation that declared, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, in that they are endowed by their creator with absolute inalienable rights, rights that no king, no religious or civil tyrant has the right or authority to strip from the people. And as Samuel Adams said, that all rights are antecedent to the Constitution. They come from the great legislator of the universe. This God that we swore to honor and love and respect and trust, this God has now been nullified by the atheist, socialist, and the Muslims that we have elected and put in government. They will be used, the Muslims, to judge America, just as they are being used to judge Europe now. Ladies and gentlemen, they're going to be used to judge Israel as well. It's going to set in place that which I am going to be able to share with you when we come to our culminating moment in this series. March 26, 2001, the time of Jacob's trouble has now begun. Every year since that day, that is when the rabbis again assemble to declare that in 2001, on that date, the day of trouble, Jacob's trouble began. Just began. It is not a 7 years of Jacob's trouble, ladies and gentlemen. Time of Jacob's trouble begins at the beginning of the 7th millennium. Now, I know I would love that for it to have been the beginning of Yeshua's, that he would return then and reign forever, for 1,000 years upon the earth. That would have been great. In 2000, when the violence erupted, I expected that it would erupt into full-blown warfare. I really expected that that's where it was going to go. But I had no revelation to declare, thus saith the Lord. I simply had the clarity from the scriptures to say that violence will erupt in Jerusalem before sundown, September 28th. That's all that I could say, because that's all that the scriptures say. Because the prophecy concerning the scriptures, or prophecy about the scriptures, or a prophetic word doesn't come by the will of man. The confirmation doesn't come by the will of man. In 2006, when I put out the Jonah Code, I would love to have been able to give you the confirmation back then, but I didn't have it. All the pieces were not in place. I said I have more, but I knew then that there are more pieces that have to fall in place that were not there. Just 6 months later, it was the week leading up to January 27th, which started the new week. But we had been filming in Israel over on the side of the Mount of Olives. Actually, the moment in time was captured on the bloopers reel. I was saying that there was a particular time in Israel when the people were, and then a siren went off, and I said, arrested. That was not in the script. That was not what I was supposed to deliver at that time, but right then, something hit me. I was due, in just 6 months' time, I was due to do a first archaeological tour extravaganza in Israel. Everything was being set up at that time. I heard the siren go off, but see, we had been hearing sirens go off and explosions happening and buses being blown up on a regular basis. And there were bombs that were being blown up in Jerusalem just about every week. We were told before going over there, we were actually at Enlace in Costa Rica, where we had the contract with Enlace to produce the Feast of the Lord. And they said, do it here, film it here. We've got a brand new studio, it's yours. Says it's dangerous, it's too dangerous to be doing this in Israel. And I said to Jonas Gonzalez, I said, the safest place for me to be is in God's will. And Roberto Emmanuel was there and heard that statement. And now Roberto actually arrives in Jerusalem that week and is there for that filming. But I heard that siren go off and you know, just the gut-wrenching feeling when a bomb goes off and, you know, people are dead and another bus has been blown up, you know, 2 blocks from the house. And, you know, one was blown up just on the other side of the building where my daughter, who came to visit, you know, steps out of the shuk at Mahani Yehuda, and the bomb goes off and people are screaming and on fire, rushing out of that. There's no way to describe the horror, the terror that happens. And right then, something hit me, and I heard a voice that said, what if you bring a tour over here and they blow up the bus? Now, that is what I heard in my head, and it haunted me. It haunted me for days. I couldn't get that out of my brain. What if? That is something that sets in motion some fear that goes through the mind. And I am just praying about it because it was a question and I don't have the answer. It rains all week. We're unable to film. And then finally on Sunday morning, January 27th, it's a beautiful sunshiny morning in Jerusalem. We're living on Eli Cohen Street. And so Chaim decides he's going to take off and go downtown. And I decide a little while later, I'm going to go down and get a cup of coffee. It's about 3 miles downtown Jerusalem. So we don't take a bus, we walk, because a bus is $1.25. And 3 mile walk, it's good for you. And we only rent a vehicle at the very days that we're filming. And that's what kind of tight budget we're on to produce a chronological from the Rood Awakening from Israel series. And so I go downtown and I'm walking. It's a beautiful day. The streets are absolutely full. First day of the week, everyone's working. The kids are at school. And but yet the streets are filled with people. So much so I'm walking down Jaffa Street and I have to get around this one area. I had to step out on the street and walk around the bus stop. And then I step back up on the street. And then my eyes catch a shoe store, Jaffa 50. It says Now Sandals. It hit my mind. Chaim said that he needed to have his Now Sandals resold. So as I'm walking up toward the building, out from the building, a woman walks with a suitcase in her hand. We walk past each other, and I keep walking, and 4 more steps, the entire front of the building dissolves. A blast goes past me in smoke, and I smell the fumes of burning flesh and burning hair, and then a woman's head rolls to my feet. I look to my left, and there are arms and there are legs. There are people that are on fire. I look out in the street, and there's a man with both of his legs blown off. His right arm is gone, and the stub of his right arm is on fire. He flails for a couple seconds, and he's done. He's gone. He's dead. I look back at myself to see if I'm all there. And I hear a voice that says very calmly, very loudly, because I'm literally deafened from the concussion, and that's why I wear hearing aids today. You are here to help. That's what I hear. I turn to my left, and I see an Israeli soldier who has blown his back. His shirt is gone. The stubble of his hair and beard are just smoking. It was just flash fire. It's gone. He's blown his back. He struggles to start to get up. I step over this woman's head, leap over a few arms and legs, and there I get to him as he starts to struggle to get up, and I see he's covered with blood, and he looks at me and says in English, which surprises me, am I hurt? And I run my hands over the front and the back of him, and I take his right hand and put it above a gash above his right eye, and I said, keep pressure on this. You've got a cut above your right eye, but you are going to be okay. This is not your blood. And then I turn to my left, and there's an M16 just a few feet away. And I said to him, is that your weapon? And he said, yes. I said, I'm going to get it for you, okay? Because now I'm going to arm myself. The shoulder strap, a nylon shoulder strap, has been shredded from it. The force that it would take to do that, I can only imagine, having carried an M14 with a shoulder strap like that. He's got an M16, the shoulder strap is shredded from it. I go over, I crawl on my hands and knees, I get a hold of it with my thumb and forefinger and drag it over to the soldier and put it right in front of him. I flip it over, I check the magazine and safety, I look at him and I say, I am a U.S. Marine. If anything happens, I will handle your weapon for you, okay? Now, fortunately, I didn't have to go on and explain how I'm a fat, old U.S. Marine. At the moment, U.S. Marines seem to just work for him. And I know from experience and from what I've heard in the past that many times the terrorists, the Muslims, will set off a bomb. As the rescue workers come in, then they will still open up fire or set off another bomb. I want to have a weapon there so that I can put a bullet in the head of the first person that starts to shout out, Allahu, bam, dead. That is what I'm watching for. That's why I need the weapon there. Seconds pass. I look around. There's another Israeli soldier blown back. Other people are getting to him. Then there's a woman who is caught up in these wires that are in front of this pillar that are blown down from the building. And she's tangled up in them. Now, that just happens to be that 16-inch wide concrete pillar that I was on the other side of. That as a woman walked out of the shoe store with this suitcase and stepped past me, she took 4 more steps and that suitcase detonated. I took 4 steps and I was squarely on the opposite side of the concrete pillar that blew the entire front of the store away. For 150 feet in each direction, all the front storefronts were gone. Across the street, for 100 feet, the storefronts were gone. The front windshield of a bus was blown out. 150 plus people are going to go to the hospital. It is the largest bomb that's ever been blown up in downtown Jerusalem. And this woman is tangled up in these wires trying to get through them. And I could see that blood was soaking her sweater. It's just a few feet away. The rifle is in front of that Israeli soldier. I know all I have to do is turn around, drop down, and I can grab it. And so I will go over to her, and I see that the blood is coming out from her sweater. And I look down, and she has a piece of plate glass sticking out of her thigh, tangled up in this. I look in her eyes, and they are completely dilated. There is no color at all. I thought that she may have been blinded by the concussion. And I said, can you see me? Can you see me? And she said, I have to find my husband. I have to find my husband. I said, no, your husband will come to you. I took her by the shoulder and I held her firmly because I know she can't move right now. We got to wait for the medics. If she moves, she could cut an artery, and so I've just got to hold her. And she said, I have to find my husband. And then she looked over my shoulder and saw the man in the street with both of his legs blown off. And she screamed, my husband, that's my husband. And I just prayed. I said, Lord, what do I do? How do I comfort her? And right then, a young Jewish girl came up. And I said, she can't move. You got to hold her right here. She can't move. That's her husband. She wrapped her arms around her sister, avoiding the glass in her leg, and just held her right there. I looked around. Other people were being taken care of. Emergency workers were coming in. Looks like everything was going as planned. No other attacks. So I picked up this woman's head. I held it in my arms, thinking, here's a young Jewish mother, her children at school, her wife, husband's at work. No one's even going to know she's dead for hours. What am I going to do with this woman's head? And so I took a piece of the blue banner that blew down from the building. They covered the man up in the street with part of it. I took this woman's head, I wrapped it up, and I was standing there and thinking, what am I going to do? I can't just lay it down. So I put it over by a pillar. I stepped back and I said, I'm going to have to wait until I can tell somebody what I did. And so an officer, IDF, came up and I said, I wrapped a woman's head and I put it over by that column. And I couldn't think of Rosh Isha to save my life. I could, Hebrew, and he finally, and and he said, woman's head? I could tell by his expression he knew. It's time for me to get out of there. I walked a half a block away, and I stopped. I thought, I better take a better look, make sure I'm all there. And I had blood, I had flesh, I was just covered with just all sorts of human debris at this point. And I held up my hands to look to see if everything's all right, no cuts. And I was rock solid. It surprised me. I thought I would be, just shaking with adrenaline rush. That's what you would expect from that. But I'm rock solid. You're here to help. You're here to help. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if I had heard from the Lord that morning, I'm going to send you downtown Jerusalem and blow up a bomb just 8 paces away from you. People's arms and legs you're going to have to step over. You're going to hold a woman's head in your hands, but not one hair of your head is going to be singed. If I was given that revelation, I think I'd probably still be under my bed today. I'd never walk into that situation. But ladies and gentlemen, that happened to me because it is a prophetic testimony. We are here to help. We are not here to get blown up. We are here to help. And if we will do our job right now and continue doing that, when the brimstone hits the fan, when the earth shakes, you are going to know what to do. You will be rock solid because you are on a rock. That is why that happened. Because the time of Jacob's trouble has begun. There will be 1,000 on one side and 10,000 laying dead on the other side. It won't come nigh to you. This is the promise. We're all going to go sometime, but we're going to live as if we are immortal because we are. If we are dead and in the grave, blown to pieces, we will be raised with an incorruptible body. If we are still alive, radiation burns, whatever, we will be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. But until that day, you are here to help.